He helped a hurt alien girl. Never knowing she was a legend told across galaxies, Elias had been traveling the same dusty paths for years. The outer edges of the human colony were harsh, almost forgotten by the central governments of the Galactic Federation, but he didn't mind. He liked the quiet, the slow hum of life on a planet far from crowded starports. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky terrain as he checked supply stations along the cliffside canyon. His work was routine, almost meditative, but today something felt different. A faint, unusual signal pulsed near the edge of the cliff, flickering irregularly. Elias frowned, adjusting the sensor on his wrist. The readings were faint, almost imperceptible, but they were there. He had been trained to investigate unknown signals, and something deep inside him told him not to ignore this one. He followed the pulse, stepping carefully over rocks and loose gravel. The canyon walls rose high above him, and the wind whistled through the cracks in a way that made his skin tingle. As he rounded a bend, he spotted movement ahead. At first he thought it might be an animal, one of the larger creatures that sometimes wandered near the colony's outskirts. But then he saw the small, trembling figure lying against a rock, her body barely moving. Elias' heart quickened. She wasn't a human. Her skin shimmered faintly under the sun, dotted with patterns of bioluminescent markings that pulsed slowly, like tiny stars embedded in her skin. The girl was hurt, and it was clear she had been running from something, or someone. Her legs were bent at awkward angles, and she held her arm close to her chest as if trying to protect it. Elias knelt beside her cautiously, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Hey," he said softly, "it's okay, I won't hurt you." Her eyes opened, wide and luminous, reflecting the fading light. Fear and caution warred within them. She didn't speak, but she let him get closer. Elias quickly assessed her injuries. Her arm was cut and her leg had a deep gash. The blood was dark and thick, unfamiliar to him, but he had dealt with injuries before. He dug out a med kit from his pack and knelt beside her. "Can you move?" he asked gently. She shook her head, her fingers trembling. Elias nodded, understanding. "That's fine, I'll help you. We'll take it slow." He carefully cleaned the wounds, using antiseptic and bandages, speaking softly all the while. It was strange, talking to someone who didn't understand him, but he hoped the sound of his voice would calm her. Minutes stretched into an hour as he worked. The sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and red. Finally, she let out a soft, musical sigh, leaning slightly against him as if she trusted him enough to let her guard down. Elias smiled faintly. "There we go, not perfect but better." She tilted her head, studying him with those glowing eyes. Then she whispered something, her voice almost like a melody, broken and alien. Elias frowned. He couldn't understand her words, but the emotion was clear: fear, confusion, and a tiny spark of hope. He mimicked her gestures, pointing to his heart, then to her. She nodded faintly, understanding in her own way. The wind picked up again, carrying distant sounds that made her flinch. Elias' brow furrowed. He scanned the horizon. Nothing visible, but he knew instinctively that she was being hunted. His pulse quickened. Whoever or whatever was after her wasn't far behind. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'll protect you." She looked at him then, really looked, and Elias felt a strange weight in the pit of his stomach. There was something in her eyes that spoke of stories and battles, of pain and survival, of a life far larger than anything he had ever imagined. But he didn't press her. He only offered a reassuring smile and continued to help her adjust her makeshift splints. Night fell, and with it came the cold. Elias built a small fire with some dry wood he had gathered. The girl watched, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. He gestured for her to stay close. She hesitated but eventually moved closer, the glow of her markings dimming as she relaxed slightly. Elias handed her a small ration pack. She stared at it for a long moment, unsure, then took a tiny bite. "You're stronger than you look," he said, nodding encouragingly. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable, but she didn't argue. Elias wanted to ask more about her, about where she came from, why anyone would hunt her, but he held back. Sometimes silence and safety mattered more than questions. Hours passed, and Elias kept watch, listening to the night sounds of the canyon. The stars above were brilliant, more vivid than anywhere near the human colonies. He wondered if she had ever seen anything like this before, or if her world was lit differently, with moons and suns he could barely imagine. Suddenly, a faint hum reached his ears, a vibration that made his skin tingle. The girl's eyes widened and her body stiffened. Elias followed her gaze, but the darkness hid whatever was coming. He instinctively moved in front of her. Then a pulse of energy surged from her, bright and sudden, causing the ground to shake slightly. Elias stumbled but managed to stay upright. The girl looked terrified, not of him, but of what she had just done. Her hands glowed briefly, and the light faded as quickly as it had appeared. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe here with me." She nodded slowly, but the tension didn't leave her body. Elias realized that there was far more to her than he had guessed. He didn't just have a wounded alien in front of him. He had someone with incredible power, someone whose story must have been told across the stars. Yet here she was, fragile and human in her fear, relying on him. Elias felt a swell of responsibility. He couldn't turn away, not now, not ever. He made a silent promise to keep her safe, no matter what it took. He didn't know the battles she had fought, the lives she had saved, or the legends she had inspired. All he knew was that she needed him, and he would rise to the challenge. The night deepened, and the canyon grew colder. Elias built a small shelter from rocks and tarps, helping her rest as comfortably as possible. She leaned against him, trusting him enough to finally close her eyes. Elias stayed awake, listening to the wind, alert for any sign of danger. Somewhere across the stars, people and aliens alike might have known her name. They might have told tales of her bravery, of battles she had won, of entire civilizations she had saved. But here, in this small canyon on a remote planet, she was just a hurt girl, scared and tired, relying on the kindness of a human who had never known the stories, never known her legend. Elias whispered softly to her, "We'll face whatever comes together. You're not alone." She stirred slightly, a faint glow in her markings pulsing slowly as if acknowledging his words. For the first time since he found her, Elias felt a small sense of hope. They would survive this night. They would face whatever dangers came next. And somewhere in that hope, a bond began to form, one that would change both their lives forever. The stars above twinkled as if in silent approval. Elias knew that this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, the universe held stories of heroes and legends, but tonight he realized that even ordinary humans could make a difference. Even ordinary humans could protect legends. And as he watched over her, he felt certain of one thing. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The morning light broke over the canyon, spilling golden warmth across the rocky terrain. Elias woke first, as usual, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. The stars had faded, and the wind had softened, but the emptiness of the canyon did little to ease his unease. He glanced at the alien girl, Lyra, who was still asleep against the shelter he had built. Her breathing was steady, but the faint glow of her bioluminescent markings told him that her body still carried tension and alertness, even in sleep. Elias knelt beside her and carefully checked her bandages. The wounds from the previous day were healing, slowly but surely. He adjusted them to prevent infection and offered her a small ration pack. She stirred at the smell of food, opening her eyes lazily. "Good morning," Elias said gently, trying not to startle her. She blinked, taking in her surroundings. For a moment her fear returned, her gaze darting toward the edges of the canyon as though expecting enemies to appear at any second. Then she noticed Elias. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. He smiled and pointed to the food. She hesitated but finally accepted it, nibbling carefully, her fingers glowing faintly in the sunlight. "You're healing," Elias said. "Good, today we need to move. It's not safe to stay here." Lyra nodded silently. She still didn't speak much, and when she did, her words were fragmented and musical, difficult for Elias to understand. But over time, he had learned to interpret her gestures and the subtle inflections of her voice. Patience was the key. They packed their small belongings, Elias carrying what they could not, and began their slow trek along the canyon's winding paths. Lyra's steps were careful, favoring her injured leg, but Elias noticed her natural agility. Even wounded, she moved with a grace and speed that seemed almost unreal. At one point she leapt lightly across a gap in the canyon, her movements precise and controlled. Elias' breath caught. "You're really strong," he said, admiration clear in his voice. She gave a small smile, almost shy, but there was pride in her eyes. She didn't respond with words, but Elias felt that she understood. As they traveled, Elias tried to learn more about her. He asked questions, pointing to himself, then gesturing toward her. She responded with soft musical tones and gestures of her own. Slowly, he began to understand small pieces of her story. She was not from this planet, that much was clear. Her species could survive in environments humans could not, and her skills suggested she had been trained, or experienced, beyond anything ordinary. "Why are you here?" Elias asked quietly as they rested near a small stream. Lyra's expression darkened. She shook her head, her glowing hands tracing a pattern in the air that Elias could not recognize. But he saw the fear in her eyes and he understood enough. She was being hunted, and the danger she faced was far greater than he could imagine. Elias rested a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever it is, I'll help. I won't let them catch you." Her gaze softened, and for the first time, Elias felt a flicker of trust. They continued their journey in silence for a while, the only sounds being the rush of water in the stream and their careful footsteps over the rocky terrain. By midday, they reached the edge of a small cliff overlooking a valley filled with strange, twisting trees and vibrant, alien flora. Elias marveled at the beauty, but Lyra's expression remained tense. She scanned the valley, her eyes flicking from one shadow to another as though tracking movement invisible to him. "They're close," she whispered, the tone of her voice sharp and urgent. Elias' heart raced. He scanned the horizon. Nothing was visible, yet instinct told him she was right. He trusted her judgment. If anyone knew danger, it was her. They found shelter in a small cave, hidden among overgrown vines and rock formations. Elias set up a small camp, gathering firewood while Lyra rested. He noticed the way she occasionally twitched, as if listening to something far away, and he realized that her senses were sharper than any human's. She could detect danger before it appeared, a skill honed by experience or perhaps instinct. While Lyra rested, Elias thought about her. He didn't know her story, not fully, but he felt a growing admiration for her. Here was a being who had survived unimaginable dangers, yet she trusted him enough to let her guard down, even slightly. He felt honored and determined to protect her. The afternoon passed quietly, and Elias took the time to explore the area around the cave. He found edible plants, fresh water, and safe paths that could help them escape if pursued. Human ingenuity, he thought, was sometimes enough to match even the most advanced skills. He returned to the cave, offering some of the plants as food. Lyra accepted them, watching him with curiosity, her glowing eyes studying his every move. As night fell, the wind picked up again, carrying distant sounds that made Lyra tense. Elias knew it was only a matter of time before their pursuers arrived. He took a deep breath, preparing himself mentally for what might come. He wasn't a soldier, not trained in combat beyond basic survival, but he had something just as powerful: courage, quick thinking, and the determination to protect someone who depended on him. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the valley, a low hum followed by a distant thrum of engines. Lyra froze, her body stiffening. Elias followed her gaze and saw faint lights approaching. The hunters had arrived. "Stay behind me," Elias whispered, positioning himself between her and the approaching threat. His mind raced. He had no advanced weapons, no fleet to call for help, only what he could use with his own hands and his knowledge of the terrain. But he refused to let fear control him. The first hunter appeared at the edge of the clearing, a tall alien figure clad in dark armor, carrying a weapon that hummed with energy. Elias didn't hesitate. Using a combination of rocks and quick movements, he distracted the hunter, throwing debris to create noise and confusion. Lyra watched him, her eyes wide. She didn't intervene at first, letting him test the ground. Elias' plan worked better than he expected. The hunter stumbled, distracted, giving them precious seconds to retreat deeper into the canyon. Lyra moved beside him, her steps quick and precise despite her injury. Together they navigated the narrow paths, leaping over gaps and ducking behind rocks, the hunters struggling to keep up. "Impressive," Lyra said softly, almost in awe as they paused to catch their breath. Elias shrugged, trying to hide his own amazement. "I just think fast when it matters." For a moment, they shared a rare, light-hearted smile. It was brief, fleeting, but it reminded Elias that even in the face of danger, there could be moments of connection and humanity. As night deepened, they found another small cave to rest in, hidden from the hunter's view. Elias tended to Lyra's wounds again, using what little supplies he had left. She didn't speak much, but she watched him closely, her glowing hands tracing patterns as she listened to his quiet words. "You're strong," Elias said, finally breaking the silence. "Not just your skills, your courage. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Lyra's eyes softened. She nodded faintly, her glow pulsing gently. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax in his presence. Elias realized that trust was a rare gift, and he was honored she had given it to him. Hours passed, and the hunters' distant engines faded. Elias stayed awake, keeping watch, his mind alert for any sign of danger. Lyra slept beside him, small and vulnerable, yet there was a quiet strength in her presence that he could feel. She was more than just an alien girl. She was someone extraordinary, someone who had survived battles and challenges far beyond his imagination. As dawn approached, Elias watched the stars fade, thinking about the journey ahead. They would face dangers he couldn't even predict, yet he felt a growing sense of purpose. Protecting Lyra wasn't just about survival. It was about standing for something greater, about courage, compassion, and the belief that even one human could make a difference. Lyra stirred, waking to the first light of day. She looked at Elias, her glowing eyes reflecting both fear and trust. He offered a reassuring smile. "We'll face whatever comes next, together." She nodded, understanding in a way that words could not express. And for the first time, Elias realized that their bond, born out of necessity, trust, and courage, would carry them through the challenges ahead. The canyon around them was still quiet, but Elias knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the hunters would return, relentless in their pursuit. But he was ready. Human ingenuity, courage, and determination would be his weapons, and with Lyra by his side, he knew that even the most impossible odds could be overcome. As they prepared to move once more, Elias felt a strange mix of anticipation and hope. He didn't yet know the full story of the alien girl he was helping, nor did he know the legend she represented across the galaxies. But he did know one thing. They were in this together, and together they could face whatever the universe threw at them. And so, side by side, human and alien, they set out into the unknown, stepping carefully along the canyon paths, ready to face the dangers of a galaxy that had never seen them as a pair before. Elias' heart beat steadily with resolve, and Lyra's glowing form pulsed faintly, a quiet acknowledgement that perhaps, for the first time, she was not alone. The journey was just beginning. The sun had barely risen when Elias and Lyra began their cautious journey down the canyon. The air was crisp, and the valley below stretched endlessly, dotted with alien flora that glowed faintly in the morning light. Elias kept his senses sharp, scanning the surroundings for any movement. Every step was measured, every sound noticed. He had no weapons beyond his survival kit and quick thinking, but he had learned that cleverness could be just as powerful as firepower. Lyra moved beside him, her steps light yet deliberate. Despite her injuries, she walked with remarkable balance and speed. Elias couldn't help but admire her resilience. The way she moved, the way she observed everything around her, told him she had survived far greater dangers than he could ever imagine. "They'll come back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her glow flickered in short bursts as if her body was alert to some distant signal. "I know," Elias said calmly, though his heart raced, "but we'll be ready." They made their way through the valley, using the dense, twisting vegetation for cover. Elias noticed that Lyra's attention was divided between the terrain and the skies above. She would occasionally pause, tilting her head and emitting a soft, musical sound. Elias assumed it was a form of communication, perhaps to sense approaching danger. He didn't interfere, respecting her methods. After a few hours of careful travel, they reached a narrow ravine. The path was treacherous, with sharp rocks and sudden drops, but it offered some protection from distant eyes. Elias helped Lyra navigate the more dangerous sections, steadying her when she stumbled. She looked at him with gratitude but didn't speak, her expression serious. "You've been through this before," Elias said finally, breaking the silence. "You know how to survive in places like this." Lyra's eyes softened slightly. She didn't respond with words, but the small nod she gave him said more than any sentence could. Elias felt a mix of admiration and humility. She was clearly someone extraordinary, a being who had seen the galaxy in ways he could not imagine. Yet here she was, relying on him in this moment. The ravine opened into a wider clearing, and they paused to rest near a cluster of strange, luminescent plants. Elias offered her more rations, and she accepted them without hesitation. As they ate, he noticed her studying the sky again. Her glow flickered in rapid pulses, and Elias realized she was sensing something approaching. "Someone's coming," she said, her voice tense. Elias followed her gaze and spotted distant movement, a group of figures moving swiftly toward them. They were humanoid but taller and more heavily armored than any human he had seen. Weapons glimmered in the sunlight, and their movements were precise, coordinated. The hunters had returned. Elias' mind raced. There was no time to escape in a straight line. They would be overtaken before they could reach safety. He needed a plan, and fast. He scanned the terrain and noticed a series of narrow paths winding up the canyon walls. If they could reach higher ground, they might have a chance. "Follow me," he whispered, taking Lyra's hand to guide her. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then trusted him enough to move with him. Together they began the ascent, careful to avoid loose rocks and hidden pitfalls. The hunters were fast, but Elias' knowledge of terrain gave them an advantage. He led Lyra through hidden paths, using natural cover to stay out of sight. Every time the hunters approached a clearing, he would use small diversions, rocks thrown to make noise, flashes of light reflected from his sensors to mislead them. Lyra watched in awe as his simple, human ingenuity kept them one step ahead. As they climbed higher, the canyon walls narrowed, forming a natural fortress. Elias found a small ledge overlooking the hunters' path and motioned for Lyra to stay low. They crouched behind rocks, watching as the hunters passed below, unaware of their presence. "That was clever," Lyra whispered, her glowing hands tracing patterns in the air. Elias couldn't understand the shapes, but the admiration was clear. They continued along the ledge, using it to gain even more elevation. Elias noticed that Lyra's movements were becoming smoother, her strength returning with each careful step. He realized that she wasn't just recovering, She was adapting, using the terrain to her advantage as well. Together they moved with precision, each step bringing them closer to safety. By midday, they reached the top of the canyon, a plateau offering a panoramic view of the valley below. Elias allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, scanning the horizon. The hunters were still searching, but they had not yet realized that Elias and Lyra had reached the high ground. Lyra looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. For the first time, she spoke more clearly, her voice melodic but broken in his understanding. "Human clever." Elias chuckled softly. "We both are," he said. "We make a good team." The plateau offered more than safety. Elias noticed a cluster of caves nearby, hidden from view by natural rock formations. It could serve as a temporary shelter while they planned their next move. He led Lyra there, careful to stay silent and avoid detection. Inside the cave, they rested. Elias tended to Lyra's leg again, reinforcing the splint and cleaning any new abrasions. She watched him, her eyes reflecting the firelight he managed to create. "You've done this before," Elias said quietly. "You've faced worse, haven't you?" Lyra's glow dimmed slightly and she nodded. Then, in a voice he could almost understand, she whispered, "Galaxies saved." Elias blinked. He didn't fully grasp her meaning, but he understood enough to feel awe. This was no ordinary alien girl. She had survived battles, perhaps entire wars, and yet here she was, trusting him with her life. The afternoon passed quietly. Elias gathered more firewood and explored the immediate area outside the cave, looking for signs of danger or escape routes. He found a narrow path leading further into the plateau, offering vantage points and cover. He realized that if they could stay on high ground, they could outmaneuver the hunters, even with their limited resources. As night approached, Lyra spoke more, her words fragmented but carrying meaning. She described glimpses of her past, images of starships, distant planets, and people who had depended on her. Elias listened carefully, piecing together the fragments. He didn't need a full story to understand the magnitude of her experience. She was a living legend, a protector of civilizations, yet here she was, vulnerable and in need of help. Elias felt a swell of determination. He had faced challenges before, but none like this. Protecting Lyra wasn't just about survival. It was about standing up for someone extraordinary, someone whose life could change the course of entire galaxies. He felt honored to be her companion, her ally in a universe that often seemed indifferent to individuals. Suddenly, distant lights flickered on the horizon. The hunters had regrouped, scanning the plateau. Elias' pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had a plan. Using the terrain to their advantage, he would lead the hunters into a series of traps, using natural obstacles and quick thinking to level the playing field. "Stay close," he whispered to Lyra. She nodded, her eyes reflecting trust and resolve. Together they moved silently along the plateau, each step deliberate, each movement calculated. The hunters approached, unaware of the ambush awaiting them. Elias used rocks and reflective surfaces to create false signals, misleading the hunters into thinking they were elsewhere. Lyra added her own touch, using brief pulses of light from her bioluminescence to confuse sensors and hide their true location. When the hunters finally reached the first trap, Elias sprang into action. Rocks rolled down slopes, blocking paths and forcing the hunters into narrow corridors where their numbers became a disadvantage. Lyra moved beside him, her agility and tactical mind complementing his strategy. Together, they were unstoppable. The hunters tried to adapt, but Elias' knowledge of terrain and human ingenuity kept them ahead. He realized that their simplicity, simple tricks, clever timing, and understanding of natural obstacles was their greatest advantage. Lyra's powers, combined with his ingenuity, created a synergy neither the hunters nor Elias could have anticipated. After hours of careful maneuvering, the hunters were exhausted and disoriented. Elias and Lyra paused on a high ledge, watching them retreat. The danger was not over, but for the moment they had won. Lyra looked at Elias, her glowing hands tracing patterns in the air, a gesture of gratitude and admiration. Elias smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. They had survived not through brute force but through courage, cleverness, and trust in each other. As night fell, they settled in the cave once more. Elias kept watch while Lyra rested, reflecting on the day's events. He had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, yet he had not wavered. He realized that human courage and ingenuity, even in the face of overwhelming odds, could rival the greatest powers in the galaxy. Lyra stirred, waking to the quiet of the night. She looked at Elias, her eyes reflecting both weariness and trust. He offered a reassuring smile. "We did well today, and will keep doing well together." Her glow pulsed softly in response, a silent acknowledgement. For the first time, Elias felt a profound connection, not just with Lyra, but with the idea that humans, ordinary humans, could make a difference in the universe. He felt hope, determination, and an unshakable resolve to protect her, no matter the challenges ahead. The stars above twinkled, vast and indifferent, yet Elias felt that tonight they had witnessed something extraordinary. A human and a legendary alien working together, surviving against impossible odds. It was a small victory, but in a galaxy full of danger, every victory mattered. As they rested, Elias knew that their journey was far from over. The hunters would return and greater challenges awaited them. But for now, they had each other. And that, he realized, was enough to face whatever came next. And so, side by side, Elias and Lyra prepared for the future, ready to confront whatever threats the galaxy held, bound by trust, courage, and the quiet knowledge that even ordinary humans could stand alongside legends. The night had been quiet, but Elias knew it was only temporary. The hunters were relentless, and the galaxy was full of dangers far beyond what he had ever faced on the remote human colony. He had learned one thing already. Fear was a tool, but courage, creativity, and trust could make the impossible possible. Lyra stirred beside him as the first light of dawn filtered through the cave's entrance. Her glow pulsed faintly, the rhythm slow and steady. Elias could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her muscles remained taut even in rest. She had not been safe for a long time, and perhaps she had never truly known peace. Yet now, for the first time, she had someone she could rely on. "We need to move," Elias whispered. "We can't stay here." Lyra nodded, gathering her minimal belongings. Her movements were careful but faster than before, as if the brief rest had restored some of her strength. Elias helped her down the cliffside paths, and together they moved toward higher ground. The plateau they had discovered the previous day offered a vantage point over the valley and the surrounding regions. From there, they could see potential escape routes and avoid the hunters more easily. As they walked, Lyra spoke in her soft, melodic voice. The words were fragmented, but Elias understood the meaning through context and gestures. She revealed glimpses of her past, images of starships, distant planets, and civilizations that had depended on her. Elias listened closely, piecing together the fragments. She was not just any alien, she was someone of immense importance. A protector, a hero whose deeds had saved lives across galaxies. Despite her legendary status, Elias noticed her humanity, or at least the alien equivalent of it, in these moments. She was cautious, but she also hesitated to harm unless absolutely necessary. Her strength was tempered by compassion, and Elias admired this. He realized that the galaxy needed beings like her, not just for their power, but for their judgment and heart. They reached the edge of the plateau as the sun climbed higher. From there, Elias could see a fleet of ships approaching from the valley below. The hunters had regrouped overnight, and they were now better equipped, more organized. Elias' pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had survived this far through thinking, observation, and courage. He could do it again. Lyra stepped beside him, her glow pulsing brighter in response to the danger. "They're strong," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We must be smarter." Elias nodded. He scanned the terrain and began formulating a plan. There were natural choke points along the plateau, narrow paths that could be used to funnel the hunters, slow their progress, and give them an advantage despite being outnumbered. Elias motioned for Lyra to follow him as they moved toward these paths. As they approached the first choke point, Elias set a series of small traps using rocks, vines, and reflective surfaces. The idea was simple: confuse and delay the hunters without engaging them directly. Lyra observed him carefully, her eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and curiosity. When Elias gestured for her to use her abilities, she released brief pulses of light, disrupting sensors and creating illusions of movement. The hunters arrived sooner than expected. They moved with precision, scanning the plateau, but Elias' traps forced them to split their forces. Rocks tumbled down slopes, causing chaos and confusion. The narrow paths limited the hunters' mobility, and Elias and Lyra took full advantage. Using agility and strategy, they moved silently, staying just out of reach while manipulating the environment to their advantage. Elias realized something important in that moment. Humans often relied on ingenuity over sheer power. Tools, tactics, and clever thinking could overcome even the most advanced threats. He had survived this far not by strength, but by adapting and thinking ahead. Lyra's powers, combined with his strategy, created a synergy neither he nor the hunters could fully anticipate. Hours passed as they carefully maneuvered along the plateau, avoiding direct confrontation while continuously wearing down their pursuers. Elias and Lyra shared brief moments of connection, silent acknowledgments, small smiles and gestures that conveyed trust and gratitude. For all her legendary status, Lyra relied on him, and he realized that human courage and ingenuity were just as vital in the galaxy as alien powers. At one point, they paused near a natural alcove overlooking the valley. Elias could see the hunters regrouping below, frustrated by their inability to locate the pair. He turned to Lyra. "We've bought some time," he said quietly, "but we need to move further. There's a larger danger out there." Lyra's expression darkened. She had been silent for a while, lost in thought. Then she spoke, her voice carrying more weight than before. "Not just hunters, forces that threaten systems, entire worlds." Elias felt a chill. He had known she was important, but the scale of the danger was larger than he had imagined. He realized that their journey was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting life itself, using whatever means they had at their disposal. They continued along the plateau, reaching a narrow canyon that offered both cover and a route to higher ground. The hunters followed, but Elias' traps and Lyra's quick thinking kept them disoriented. At one point, a hunter raised an energy weapon, aiming directly at them. Elias reacted instinctively, pushing Lyra behind a rock and using a reflective panel to redirect the weapon's beam harmlessly into the canyon wall. The hunter stumbled, giving them precious seconds to escape. Lyra looked at him with wide eyes, her glow pulsing faster. "Human clever," she whispered, a rare smile forming on her lips. Elias felt a surge of pride, tempered by the knowledge that danger was far from over. They reached a small plateau that offered a vantage point over the surrounding valleys and hills. Elias knew it was temporary safety, but it was enough to regroup. They set up a minimal camp, using rocks and natural formations for cover. Elias tended to Lyra's leg again, reinforcing the splint and checking for any new injuries. She watched him silently, her glowing hands tracing faint patterns in the air. He didn't understand the shapes, but he knew they were expressions of gratitude and trust. "You've done this before," Elias said quietly. "You've faced danger far worse than this, haven't you?" Lyra's glow dimmed slightly, and she nodded. Then she whispered words he could barely understand. "Galaxies saved." Elia's eyes widened. He didn't need a full explanation to know that she had been a protector on a scale he couldn't yet comprehend. Yet here she was, vulnerable and trusting him to help her survive. He felt a deep sense of honor and responsibility. Protecting her was no longer just a matter of survival, it was a duty. Night fell again, and with it came the cold wind. Elias kept watch while Lyra rested, her glow softening as she slept. He thought about the lessons he had learned over the past days. Courage, ingenuity, and compassion were not weaknesses. They were strengths that allowed humans to face threats that seemed insurmountable. And now, standing beside a being of legendary power, he realized that even ordinary humans could change the course of events across the galaxy. The hunters were still out there, somewhere in the valley, but Elias felt a sense of calm. He had adapted, strategized, and survived so far, and he would continue to do so. He had Lyra's trust, and she had his. Together, they were a force that neither the hunters nor any other adversary could easily overcome. As the night deepened, Lyra woke briefly, her glow flickering in the dim light. She looked at Elias, her eyes reflecting both fatigue and trust. He offered a reassuring smile. "We'll face whatever comes next, together." Her glow pulsed softly in response, a silent acknowledgement that she understood. Elias felt a profound connection, not just with her, but with the idea that humans, even ordinary humans, could stand alongside legends and make a real difference. The stars above twinkled endlessly, indifferent to the struggles below, yet Elias felt that tonight they had witnessed something extraordinary. A human and a legendary alien, working together, surviving against impossible odds. It was a small victory, but in a galaxy full of danger, every victory mattered. Elias and Lyra rested briefly, knowing the journey ahead would be harder. The hunters would return, and the galaxy held even greater threats than mere pursuers. But for the first time, Elias felt a growing sense of purpose. Protecting Lyra wasn't just about survival. It was about courage, compassion, and the quiet belief that even one human could make a difference in a vast universe. And as they prepared to continue their journey, Elias realized that this partnership, born from necessity, strengthened by trust, and fueled by determination, was the key to surviving what lay ahead. They would face challenges, yes, but they would do so together. The night passed quietly, the canyon winds whispering softly around them. Elias stayed alert, his mind active with plans and contingencies. He had learned to trust his instincts, to combine human ingenuity with observation and courage. And in Lyra's presence, he felt stronger, more capable, ready to face whatever threats the galaxy might send their way. The hunters had been slowed, but they were not defeated. Greater dangers awaited, and the next steps would be even more challenging. Yet Elias knew one thing for certain: he would not falter, he would not turn away. He would protect Lyra, and through her, he would stand for the principles that made humanity remarkable: courage, ingenuity, and the unwavering determination to do what was right, even against impossible odds. As dawn approached, Elias and Lyra prepared to leave the plateau. Their journey was far from over, but they had survived another night, outwitted another group of pursuers, and strengthened the bond that would carry them through the challenges ahead. The galaxy was vast, the dangers countless, but together they were unstoppable. Side by side, human and legend, they stepped into the uncertain future, ready to confront whatever the universe had in store. The dawn broke with a soft orange glow, spilling light over the jagged cliffs and alien forests of the plateau. Elias had slept only a little, his senses alert for any sign of the hunters, but now, seeing the world bathed in sunlight, he felt a surge of determination. They had survived nights of pursuit, navigated treacherous terrain, and outsmarted enemies far more powerful than themselves. But he knew that today could be the most dangerous yet. Lyra stirred beside him, her glow faint but steady. Her eyes opened, reflecting both exhaustion and trust. Elias offered a reassuring smile. "Today, we finish this. We'll find safety and we'll make sure they can't follow us." She nodded, and for the first time in days, she seemed relaxed, not entirely, but enough to move confidently. Elias helped her check her gear and adjust her splint. Together, they moved toward the edge of the plateau, scanning the valley below. The hunters were already visible, regrouping and reorganizing, but Elias had a plan. "Stay close to me," he whispered. "We'll lead them into a trap just like before, only this time we end it." Lyra's glow pulsed in agreement. She had begun to trust him fully, and Elias realized that human ingenuity, combined with her incredible abilities, could achieve the impossible. He studied the terrain carefully. There was a narrow canyon, winding and hidden from the main valley, leading to an ancient cave system. The hunters wouldn't expect them to use it, and it offered both shelter and a chance to strike strategically. They moved cautiously, every step deliberate. Elias placed small diversions along the way, rocks that could tumble down slopes, reflective surfaces to mislead sensors, and sounds to create false movement. Lyra contributed her powers, briefly pulsing light in patterns that disrupted the hunters' scanning systems. Together, they became a seamless unit, combining human resourcefulness with alien skill. As they entered the canyon, the hunters followed, unaware of the trap awaiting them. The path narrowed, forcing the hunters to move single file. Elias waited until the first few were deep within the confined passage before triggering a small rock slide. The noise echoed through the canyon, and the hunters were momentarily disoriented. Lyra moved beside him, using her energy to create blinding flashes, further confusing their enemies. Elias' mind raced. He had learned that fear could be weaponized, that cleverness could turn weakness into strength. The hunters were formidable, but they were predictable, and the canyon gave him the advantage. Each obstacle, each diversion, forced them into positions where their numbers were meaningless. Hours passed in tense silence as they navigated the canyon. The hunters tried to regroup, but Elias and Lyra's combination of strategy and instinct kept them ahead. At one point, a hunter lunged from a side path, weapon raised. Elias acted instinctively, using a loose boulder to knock the weapon aside. Lyra responded instantly, her glowing hands emitting a burst of energy that sent the hunter stumbling back. "You're quick," she said, her voice a rare moment of lightness amidst the tension. "And so are you," Elias replied, a small smile on his face. "We make a good team." Finally, they reached the heart of the ancient cave system. Elias had discovered it during his reconnaissance. The cavern was vast, with natural columns and formations that could be used to hide, defend, and maneuver. He guided Lyra to a high ledge overlooking the main entrance, giving them a vantage point. The hunters arrived, exhausted and frustrated, unaware of the advantage Elias and Lyra now held. Elias took a deep breath. This was the moment. Using rocks, shadows, and her powers, he created a series of diversions and traps within the cavern. Lyra's energy pulses amplified the effect, blinding sensors and creating illusions of movement. The hunters were confused, disoriented, and vulnerable. Elias felt a surge of pride. Human ingenuity combined with trust and courage had turned the tide. He realized that humans were underestimated across the galaxy not because they lacked skill, but because their strengths were subtle: adaptability, creativity, and determination. And now, in this hidden cavern, those qualities were giving him and Lyra an edge even the most advanced hunters could not overcome. The hunters advanced, trying to adapt, but each step they took played into the traps Elias had prepared. Rocks tumbled, shadows shifted, and sudden flashes of energy disoriented them further. One by one, the hunters were incapacitated, not killed but rendered unable to continue. Elias and Lyra moved swiftly, ensuring their own safety while neutralizing threats. When the last hunter stumbled and fell, Elias and Lyra looked at each other, breathing heavily. They had survived not through brute force but through courage, intelligence, and trust. The threat was over for now. Lyra's glow softened, her relief palpable. "We survived," she whispered. "Yes," Elias said, a grin spreading across his face. "Together." They took a moment to rest, catching their breath and assessing their situation. Elias knew that while the immediate threat was gone, the galaxy still held dangers. But he also knew that as long as they had each other, they could face whatever came next. Lyra began to speak more clearly, her words forming slowly but deliberately. She told Elias fragments of her past, the world she had saved, the battles she had fought, and the legends she had become. Elias listened in awe, realizing that the girl he had rescued was not just a survivor, but a hero whose deeds had echoed across galaxies. Despite her legendary status, she had relied on him, trusted him, and worked with him as an equal. Elias felt a profound sense of pride. Humanity, with its courage and ingenuity, had stood alongside a being whose life had shaped entire civilizations. He realized that this was what HFY, the spirit of human potential, was truly about. Ordinary humans rising to extraordinary challenges, making a difference where others might falter. As the day progressed, they explored the cavern system further. Elias discovered natural tunnels leading to hidden exits, ancient formations that could serve as defensive positions, and streams of fresh water that could sustain them. He realized that with careful planning, they could make this cavern their base, a safe haven where Lyra could recover fully and they could plan their next steps. Lyra watched him with admiration, her glowing hands tracing patterns in the air. Elias didn't understand the shapes fully, but he felt the meaning: gratitude, trust, and something deeper, a bond forged through shared struggle and survival. By evening, they had set up a secure area within the cavern, using natural formations to conceal their location. Elias tended to Lyra's injuries one final time, reinforcing her splint and cleaning any abrasions. She watched him, her eyes reflecting both fatigue and a newfound respect. "You've done more than I could have imagined," she said softly. "Human strong." Elias chuckled. "And you're not so bad yourself." They shared a brief moment of laughter, the tension of the past days easing slightly. Elias realized that even in the vast, dangerous galaxy, moments of connection and humanity could shine brightly. Trust, courage, and ingenuity had carried them this far, and they would continue to carry them forward. Night fell, and the stars above the cavern glittered like diamonds against the black sky. Elias kept watch while Lyra rested, reflecting on their journey. He had faced dangers he could never have imagined, yet he had not faltered. He had used every skill, every ounce of courage, and every moment of quick thinking to protect her. He realized that humans, even ordinary humans, had the power to influence the galaxy. They might not have had superpowers or legendary status, but their ingenuity, resilience, and compassion allowed them to stand alongside the most extraordinary beings. Elias felt a quiet pride, knowing that he had proven this through his actions. Lyra stirred in the night, her glow soft and steady. She looked at Elias, her eyes conveying trust and gratitude. He offered a reassuring smile. "We'll face whatever comes next, together." Her glow pulsed in response, and Elias felt a deep sense of purpose. They had survived, not through luck, but through courage, determination, and the bond they had formed. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but together they were unstoppable. The hunters were gone and the immediate threat had passed. But Elias knew that their journey was far from over. Greater challenges awaited them, but he felt ready. Human ingenuity, courage, and resilience were powerful tools, and with Lyra by his side, they could overcome any obstacle. As dawn approached once more, Elias and Lyra prepared to leave the cavern and continue their journey. The galaxy stretched before them, full of unknown dangers and adventures. But Elias knew one thing for certain: humans could rise to meet the impossible, and courage, determination, and trust could change the course of events in ways that no one could predict. Side by side, human and legend, Elias and Lyra stepped into the uncertain future, ready to face whatever the universe held. And as they moved forward, Elias felt a profound truth settle in his heart. Even ordinary humans could stand with legends, protect the innocent, and shape the galaxy through courage, ingenuity, and unwavering determination. The journey was far from over, but together they had proven that nothing, not even the most powerful hunters or the most dangerous challenges, could break the bond forged between trust, bravery, and human spirit. And in that bond, they found hope, strength, and the knowledge that they could face anything the stars might throw at them.